This happened a few years ago, when I was still living in South Dakota. I lived in a small town that literally turned off their stoplights after 9 p.m. at night. Everyone knew each other, stores and even Domino's was a 2-minute walking distance from my home. Above all else, no one in the town bothered to lock their doors due to how safe our town was and how well everyone knew each other. It was literally a quiet and lovely town, and being one of the few Asian people out there, except for the Chinese family that ran the only Chinese food takeout place in the town. I worked in the only hospital in town on assignment with my travel company, and I worked the NOC shift. I know it's cliche and I can see the eyes rolling happening. However, I honestly liked working the NOC shifts. It was usually quiet, except for days where there was a full moon. Now, I usually don't believe in the spiel about how NOC shifts with full moons always had something crazy happening. I'd been working in the medical field for 7 years, and mostly working NOC shifts. I had never experienced anything more than having someone having sundowner syndrome. But on this summer's night, it was raining, and the moon was playing peekaboo through the rolling clouds. Lightning flashed and thunder roared outside. The wind practically had nails that evening, scraping across the roof with a ghostly voice as if it were trying to wake the dead, or all of my residents. I was the only charge nurse on a unit of 80 patients. While that doesn't sound like it can be possible, in certain states there are no guidelines or limitations on how many patients a nurse, or even a certified nurse staff, can handle. I was grumbling at my station desk in Unit A. I had tons of paperwork to complete, including an admission paper that needed to be inputted into the EMAR, medications to check in and prep the paperwork and vitals for bloods, draws for the 5 a.m. labs. I remember just being so exhausted because of the night prior we had someone hysterically screaming bloody murder in Unit B, and it terrified the living daylights of the second charge nurse, we will call her Sandy, who was supposed to be on shift with me this night. So, Sandy had been so shaken up by this event, because when she had gone to check the patient, he had kept insisting that death was in the room, and his scythe was by her throat, and that he was stating that the land of the hospital was built on was cursed. It was understandable why she had called out, stating that she was feeling unwell. But damn it all, I was tired myself, and I'd gotten much sleep either. I remember closing my eyes and hearing someone approach the nurse's station. I had thought it was one of my CNAs doing her rounds, and I didn't think much of it, until the footsteps stopped at the desk. Opening my eyes, I looked to see one of my regular sundowner's patients. However, she was staring right beside me, rather than looking at me. "Hello, Mary. Is it breakfast yet?" she said in a chipper tone as I frowned and got up from my seat. "Mrs. H, no one by the name of Mary is here. Are you all right?" I asked, my eyes casting to the spot where she was looking at so intently. "Oh, Mary, I thought it was light out. I'm sorry," Mrs. H stated in loud, and then finally looked at me. "Shah, would you be a dear and help me get back to my room? It seems I've gotten this time mixed up again." Walking to the other side of the nurse's station, I gently placed my hand on Mrs. H's arm and began to guide her. "Mrs. H, who is Mary?" I asked. I know that we aren't supposed to feed any type of delusions or hallucinations that the patient has, but the way that Mrs. H had been looking at that one spot next to me, it irked me. "Oh, Mary, the charge nurse. She comes here only at night. She used to come all the time, but now she can only be here on certain nights, is what she told me the other day." I tucked Mrs. H back into bed and put on a little alarm that would trigger if she to leave her bed unattended. Shaking my head, I saw one of my CNAs doing her rounds in Unit B. You see, there were 2 units, Unit A and Unit B. Usually we had 1 nurse to each unit and 2 CNAs for each unit as well. But we were a little bit screwed that night due to the incident on the night before, leaving only myself and 2 CNAs on shift, making it difficult for us to get all of our work and duties and do the rounds at the same time. "Sheila, I'm going to still be at Unit A. If you guys need me, just walkie me, please." Sheila nodded to me and continued her rounds as I walked like a zombie back to my chair and then noticed my files had been moved around my desk. I shook my head again. I must have toppled the files over when I got up, I think. Scooting the chair up to the desk, I began to do my work again, concentrating on inputting the data and writing notes for the patients I had given midnight medications to. Feeling my eyes beginning to droop a little, I rubbed them, and I saw someone approach me from the side. Her attire was of white, so I'd assumed it was Sheila or Janice, because both of the CNAs had worn white scrubs today. "Where is the linen closet?" The voice was very soft, a faint whisper. "Down the wall, towards the entrance of the ER section. It should be the closest with the sliding door. Are you becoming forgetful tonight?" I joked without looking up. The figure stood there for a moment before almost gliding out of my vision. Closing my eyes again and shaking my head, I brushed it off and continued to work when Janice came up to me, her face a bit pale. "What's wrong, Lady Jan?" I was pretty sure my eyes were bloodshot and dry, but the way Janice looked at me, it would easily set off alarm bells inside of me. I slowly stood up. "What's wrong?" "Shaw, who were you talking to a few minutes ago?" "One of you guys. Didn't you ask me about the linen closet?" I frowned as she shook her head. "No. I've been in the kitchen stocking for tomorrow's morning breakfast service. I just came out and noticed you talking to someone, but..." She seemed afraid now. "But what, Janice?" A troubled expression was forming on her pretty face. It looked like she was torn with what to say. "Janice, what is it?" "Was it the lady in white?" was what came from her lips. "Didn't you talk to her?" I sat back down. This was about some crazy ghost bullshit again. Some dark curse hoo-ha. I don't want to hear it. "Janice, I don't want to hear about the full moon nonsense and ghosts right now. I have a shit ton of work and I don't have time to talk about ghost stories tonight. I'm not trying to be a bitch here, but..." Janice held up her hands, fear still etched across her face. "Shaw, please be more careful of who you speak to. The dead welcome any conversation and is an invitation to haunt you. Especially here." I gave her a look and breathed a heavy sigh. "Jan, thanks for your concern, but I think I'm probably just hallucinating or seeing things for lack of sleep. Don't worry." I went back to work as Janice began to wring the hem of her white scrub top. "Please be careful and don't answer any knocks," Janice stated as she looked around one more time and left to go back into the kitchen. What foolishness. Don't answer to knocking? I again shook my head. We could practically make this into a drinking game for how many times I shook my head. Someone should down 2 shots of their favourite hard liquor. Lightning danced outside as the hours crept by, slowly. The storm outside went into full gear as hail began to pummel the rook at 5 a.m. As I made my blood draw rounds. After drawing my last tube, I went off the floor to Unit B, and headed to the main part of the hospital to drop off the specimens. My footfalls echoed in the near-empty hospital, as most of the ER nurses and doctors were probably doing shift change, and I didn't see anyone except for the janitor as I went to the lab. I entered the lab and filled the vials under the appropriate areas for the phlebotomist to find when they arrive on shift. At that given moment, a knock sounded off from the back entrance that led to the corridor of Unit A. I hadn't given it much thought as I approached the door and swung it open. I frowned as I realized that no one was there. Peering out into the corridor, I didn't even see the janitor. I looked around one more time before actually stepping out into the hallway and shutting the door. As the door closed behind me, I suddenly felt a sense of unease hit the bottom of my stomach as I began to make my way back to the unit. Once again, I reasoned it had to the lack of sleep I'd gotten, and I hadn't stomached decent food in the last 48 hours, because coffee wasn't considered food of sustenance yet. As I pulled my keycard out to open the door for Unit A, I heard knocking, but the knock was more like as if someone was drunk and could only raise their hand to knock every 5 to 10 seconds. It was a strange, dull knock that echoed all the way down the hall to me. The knocks continued, and I felt the hackles on the back of my neck rise as the knocks started to speed up. My hand immediately pressing the keycard against the sensor as I rejected my card. The knocks began to somewhat start echoing closer, as if there were footsteps walking towards me. The knocking got louder as I tried again with my card, and it finally allowed my entrance, swinging the door open and slamming it behind me. I heard the knocking as it suddenly began barreling down on the door behind me. I faced the door and began to walk backwards as it kept going until it was more of a high-pitched, whirring noise, and then stopped. My heart was racing, sweat beating down my forehead. This had to be the result of working too much OT and very little sleep, with caffeine being my only lifeline of energy. I rubbed my temples as I forced myself to breathe and calm down. It was all in my mind. That's what it was. I said it out aloud. It's all in my mind. Before I could turn, I felt the hackles rise at the back of my neck. "Where is the linen closet?" I screamed bloody murder at that fair moment, and whirled to find Mrs. H holding her hand to her chest and staring at me. I gasped, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. H. You scared the panties off of me." Mrs. H seemed amused and asked again where the linen closet was, to which I helped her get a couple of new blankets and pillowcases. The rest of the shift went smoothly, my shift ending at 8:30 a.m. 2 hours of OT clocked in for the day. I grabbed my things to get the hell out of Dodge, but was stopped by Janice, who had also stayed behind to help a few things. I almost let a groan of agony when she stopped me. I was tired. I really wanted to go home and sleep. It was my day off the next 3 days. "Shah, you heard the knocking, didn't you?" Her hand was gripping my wrist as a vice-like hold that sent signals of pain to my groggy brain. "Jan, not now, please." I pulled my arm away from her, practically having to rip it out of her grasp, as I saw a look of terror in her eyes. "Please take this." She pushed a stone and a bundle of sage into my hand. As much as I tried to push it back into her hands, Janice firmly gripped my wrist and covered her hand over my own and looked at me with dead serious eyes. "Keep this on you at all times, and by the foot of the shower stall when you bathe. Please do this, Shah. For me." The fear in her voice rattled me a bit down at that moment. But just for that moment. "Okay, Jen." I pocketed the items into my scrub pants pocket, leaving the facility with thoughts of just falling into bed or the nearest couch for the next few hours of my day off. I'd made it home without any issues, and scurried up the stairs to my upstairs apartment. The morning was quiet, with the only occasional whoosh sound coming from cars passing by on the highway behind the apartment. Peeling off my scrubs, and forgetting the items that Janice had given me, I fell into the couch, and was close to knocking out. Until I heard a dull knock come from the closed door of my bedroom in front of me.